Now, eventually, Russia arrests women's basketball star Brittney Griner.
Griner, yeah.
Brittney Griner. I remember when this happened. That the fact that the White House immediately started talking about negotiating a release of her in exchange for this nefarious Russian bad guy. I'm like, what about the United States Marine that's there? I knew enough about your story to know that. Why are we talking about just because this lady's a basketball star? Why is this Marine being left out? I mean, when that happened, you're hearing that America's starting to negotiate this release, and you're being left behind. What were you thinking?
It was quite difficult, and don't forget that in April of 2022, before the negotiations for Griner, Trevor Reed, a Marine, had been arrested. He was traded on humanitarian grounds for Yurchenko. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So that had taken place. So the U.S. had 3 people the Russians wanted. Maria Butina was given a light sentence and sent home. So she's out of the picture. There were 2 left. Trevor Reed is traded for Konstantin Yurchenko. So that leaves Victor Bout that the Russians want. And Russia's got Brittney and myself. So the U.S. is saying, well, even though the Russians want Krasikov from Germany, we don't have him. We have Bout. We'll do a 2-for-1. We'll do Paul and Brittney for Victor Bout. And the Russians said, no, we'll trade Paul for Krasikov and we'll trade Victor for Brittney. And the efforts of the U.S. government to dissuade that didn't work, and the trade went through Brittney for Victor. But that was it was a terrible feeling for me because I knew, and it was widely reported that the U.S. had nothing else that the Russians wanted. So the U.S. gave up their bargaining position. It wasn't Brittney's fault necessarily.
Sure.
It wasn't Trevor's fault, that he had gone home first. But I knew that the U.S. had given up their negotiation platform, and the only thing that could be done was to convince the Germans to give up this assassin to get me home. And
they weren't going to do it.
Yeah, they were saying at first they weren't going to do it.
Yeah.
And then when they agreed with Navalny being involved, the Russians killed Navalny. So that put the whole deal in jeopardy. The U.S. went, and the Canadians and British and the Irish involved too, went around Europe speaking to the Norwegians and the Slovenians and the Poles and saying, look, who do you have that's Russian that Russia might want that we can kind of throw in to sweeten the deal? And, it was a joint effort to kind of get a group of people together, as well as Krasikov, to get me out. But in the meantime, after, Brittney went home, Evan Gershkovich, he was arrested. He was a reporter. And, same thing. The Russians just grabbed him, said he was a spy, and held him on political grounds, such as mine, to do a trade.
When this deal fell through and Brittney's went through, I mean, do you think that was the environment of a weak leadership in the White House? I mean, for me, like I look at the difference between a President Trump in the White House and a President Biden in the White House, and the position of negotiating power and strength. I believe that with different leadership in the White House, that deal would have been made.
Yeah, the frustrating thing was, that I sat in prison for 2 years with President Trump, and then another 2 years with President Biden, and it was sort of the same thing. The Russians were calling the shots, and they kept changing the goalposts, but apparently we had no leverage, and it was extremely frustrating. Mike Pompeo was very supportive. He was the Secretary of State. Antony Blinken, Secretary of State.
So you were in there both administrations.
Yeah, very supportive. The problem really was that, the guy who takes the hostage calls the shots, and they had the hostages, and they kept stacking the deck.
Hey guys, 10 years ago, I had found myself in a position to where investing in Mighty Oaks and all the different things I'm involved in, I had found myself not prepared for retirement. And I went to my friend Ryan Whelan at Allied Wealth. I'm so happy with the results for me that I asked him to partner with this show, and he is a partner of this show now. So if you're like me and you need someone to help you with your retirement, with your investments, with just your overall wealth management, go to alliedwealth.com and meet Ryan and his team to get you set up.